You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tian. In addition to this show, I write for the Packers Post and for Cheesehead TV, and Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. And Sean, the draft is less than a week away.
Let's just get it started, man. Let's just get this going. But before we actually get started on today's episode, Gil, a few words about our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com. That's theticketking.com, or visit their locations in Green Bay and good old Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packer game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Yeah, it feels like this is such a weird part of the NFL offseason, though, Gil, where let's just get going, man. It's just, what are we waiting for? I feel like every front office, unless you're the most inept front office in football, usually the Chicago Bears, they're all ready. They're all ready for the draft. So I don't understand the reason to stretch this out. I'm just ready to get going, Gil.
Yeah, I'm ready to get going too. And, we ended the drama about Brazil last week. So we know we're going to South America for week one. We already know 1/17 of the schedule. It's time. I am so eager to get the draft going. And, I am just thinking sort of big picture right now, how good the 2023 draft was and how much of an impact it made on the team. If Brian Gutekunst can put together one more draft like that, or even close to that, how amazing that would be and what it would set up this team for coming up in this coming season.
And don't forget, 2022 was a pretty darn good draft for Brian Gutekunst too. So you have 3 drafts in a row where you knock it out of the park. Oh, man, you're going to be really tough to beat. And you got your franchise quarterback, it appears, for the future as well. But before the draft, though, Gil, some free agency news for the Packers. They signed a veteran offensive tackle, Andre Dillard. He was a former first-round pick by the Philadelphia Eagles in 2019. He was the 22nd overall pick in that draft. Green Bay picked Rashawn Gary, number 12 overall in 2019, and one pick ahead of Dillard was Darnell Savage, the former Packer safety. Now he was picked 21st overall, now with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Played his first 4 seasons, Dillard did, with the Eagles. Played for the Tennessee Titans in 2023. He's primarily played left tackle. He's played some right tackle. He's going to be wearing number 73 for the Packers, which is kind of fitting because Josh Nijman was number 73. Now he's off to the Carolina Panthers this offseason, signed there in free agency. What do you make of this signing, Gil? Someone who obviously had he was a workout warrior. He really shined when it came to the NFL Combine, but just hasn't really seemed to put the pieces together at the NFL level, but worth taking a flyer on if you're the Green Bay Packers, especially a team that needs some depth along the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, to me right now, this is your not Josh Nijman 2.0, not in the sense of you're bringing him in to develop him and build him up, but from the standpoint of he's your swing tackle. He's an experienced player who could fill in on the left side or the right side. He started more than 10 games in each of his 4 seasons in the National Football League. You could do a lot worse than having him as your third tackle. Let's put it that way.
Someone who's been there and kind of done that, but he was with the Tennessee Titans last year. They released him at the start of the free agency period, which Brian Gutekunst loves to pick up those guys who get cut by other teams. It doesn't mess with the compensatory pick formula, the net loss formula that the Packers obviously covet and make a big deal out of in every draft every year and when they're going into free agency as well. But last year, per PFF, he allowed 12 sacks in pass protection. The Packers as a team last year allowed 30 sacks in 17 games. That was 3rd best in the NFL. The Titans, I don't know if you could put all on Andre Dillard, but they had a lot of issues on offense in general. You had a rookie quarterback in Will Levis who showed flashes, but had some struggles too as a rookie. The running game with Derrick Henry kind of took a step back as a runner. There were no really threats on the outside as receivers. It was just a big mess at Tennessee. The O-line allowed the fourth most sacks in football, with 64 last year. Dillard wasn't very good. He has struggled a little bit, but maybe the Packers can. This is a guy who had a 9.8 relative athletic score coming out of Washington State in 2019. Maybe the Packers can find what made him a first-round pick and use that to their advantage. If it doesn't work out, though, this is probably – we don't know contract details yet as we're recording. You got to think it's like a 1-year minimum deal, very incentive-laden, and it's insurance in case they aren't able to load up on the guys they want in the draft next week.
Yeah, I mean, basically speaking, this is your insurance policy. This is your guy who, if you throw him into the lineup, you don't have to worry. And look, the other thing is this. You talked about all the sacks he gave up. When you've got a rookie quarterback back there, they usually hold the ball longer. They're processing at a much slower rate than a veteran quarterback would. And so you can't say it was all on Dillard or all on any particular lineman. And that whole offense, as you mentioned, was very out of sync and lacked big play threats. So, to me, this is a low risk kind of a move by Brian Gutekunst. You add somebody who could give you some depth, who could fill in if needed, and probably at a very low cost. And certainly, if you say goodbye, whatever the signing bonus was, that's what you lose if he doesn't end up making the team. So to me, you add experience, you add depth, you got nothing much to lose. I like the move. I'm not going to say this is the season-changing thing where we went from being a good team to a Super Bowl elite contender overnight by signing him, but I think it was a solid move under the circumstances.
Yeah, it's a matter of two where they get him in-house, and Luke Butkus has done a great job as offensive line coach. He really has. He did a terrific job helping develop Rasheed Walker last year, and just seeing Zach Tom, how good of a player he's become. You got to think Luke Butkus has had a hand in that too. John Runyon Jr. just got a big fat contract with the New York Giants. He walked in free agency. He got some great money. Good for John Runyon Jr., your guy Gil, former Michigan Wolverine. But the one game I remember watching Tennessee last year with Dillard playing was against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he struggled mightily against T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith. Marcus Golden also had some good moments in that game too. And it was just a matter of T.J. Watt's a great player. He's obviously one of the best edge rushers in football today. Could have been a Packer, isn't a Packer. That's a story of yore. We're not going to talk about that. That's a whole can of worms. But it was just a bit concerning seeing how much he struggled. He was just getting beat so clean and really had his hands full against a premier pass rush. So again, it's like you hope Packers can unlock something. I'm not really expecting much of this. I hope to be surprised by this personally.
Yeah. And like I said, if it doesn't work out, you're not losing much, if anything at all, other than maybe the signing bonus. So to me, it makes sense. It's a move. We know how much Brian Gutekunst loves those athletic guys, and the belief, especially heading into the draft, if you get an athlete in here, we can coach him up. We can teach him the technique. Got nothing to lose. Got nothing to lose. Maybe nothing to gain, but nothing to lose. Well,
speaking of nothing to lose, the Packers began their voluntary workouts this past week. And something notable that you can't really lose on, cornerback Jair Alexander, he was present. He was photographed by Packers team photographer Evan Siegel walking into the practice facility with newly acquired safety Xavier McKinney. And why this is newsworthy is because he didn't show up last year. And he didn't show up to the voluntary workouts last offseason. He struggled with injuries. And when he was on the field, he struggled on the field as well. He got suspended for conduct detrimental. There seemed to be some issues clearly with former defensive coordinator Joe Barry. Now the Packers have a new defensive coordinator in Jeff Hafley, and Jair Alexander shows up for day one. Pretty basic vanilla stuff, but Gil, you got to think this is a good sign that Jair Alexander seems to be refocused and recommitted to the Packers.
It is. And, it becomes even more important when you do have a new defensive coordinator. You're implementing a new system. It's not like, okay, I'm comfortable. I know what to expect. So the fact that he shows up, he's taking care of business. And I think the other thing is this. You go back to that suspension where Matt LaFleur said, okay, we had a talk. We cleared the air. We're on the same page. So far, it actually appears that is the case. And it's huge because Jair Alexander is a vocal leader in the locker room. and you don't want him being off to the side doing his own thing. You want him as an integral part of the emotional fabric of this team. Having him there from day one speaks volumes.
And you got to think, too, that this is such a young team, but it's a team that seems to have the right mindset. And it's a team that really went above and beyond expectations last year. And this is a matter of going into this. I was curious to know if Jair Alexander was going to show up to these offseason voluntary workouts, because it's like, hey, you're either all in or you're all out. This is honestly, I know it's just voluntary workouts. It's not training camp, but to me, it's like, hey, if you're committed to the Packers, show up. If you're not, get out. And it's great to see that he's there, because when he's bought in, man, he's one of the best corners in football. And I want him on my team. He's a bit of a punk on the field. He talks a lot of trash and everything, but that's what you love about him. That's what makes him so great when he is locked in. And just seeing him, I know, again, it's just voluntary workouts, but it meant the world to see that as a Packer fan, just knowing, hey, this guy's one of the veteran leaders, or he's expected to be one of the veteran leaders, and he's showing up. He's ready, and let's go get it. Let's go get a championship, Gil. Let's go get one.
Yeah, it is very refreshing to see him showing up, as opposed to last year when he didn't, the year before when certain other leaders on this team did not show up for voluntary workouts. So getting the season started off, or the offseason started off on the right foot, is a positive.
And a good thing, too, because maybe the Packers don't have to necessarily reach for a cornerback during draft weekend next week, with the potential of Jair Alexander wanting out down the road. I think it seems to be that he's bought back in. And the Packers coming up, as we're recording on Thursday, April 18th, they currently have 11 draft picks in the 2024 draft, 1 in the first round, 2 in the second round, one of those picks being from the Jets, courtesy of the Aaron Rodgers trade. 2 picks in the third round, 1 courtesy of the Buffalo Bills in the Rasul Douglas trade, a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, a compensatory pick thanks to the Allen Lazard signing with the Jets, 2 6th-round picks, one of those being compensatory due to the Jaron Reed signing with the Seattle Seahawks last year, and then 2 7th-round picks, one of those being a compensatory pick from the Dean Lowry signing with the Minnesota Vikings. And, Gil, you got to think the Packers, their first pick is 25th overall. If they trade up, what is the most likely scenario where you believe they possibly trade up in the draft? And how high do you possibly see them going if they do make a move up the board?
I could see them trading into maybe the mid to late teens. That would be as far as I think. I don't think they're really ready to go 6th or 5th or something like that to grab. But usually if you're trading up, you're trying to grab one player. And to me, you're talking about positional value. We know the Packers' needs. We've talked about it extensively on this show, and we're going to continue to talk about it until the draft. Offensive tackle, clearly a need. Interior offensive line, definitely a need. Linebacker, safety, cornerback, perhaps also big needs. Are there any of those positions where there is a special player that you want to go up and get, but if you don't get this one guy or one of these 2 guys, there's a huge drop off at that position, and you will be, just out of luck as far as really trying to upgrade that spot? If that is the case, then by all means you trade up and you try to grab that special player.
And you got to think too, where we're fans, we don't know half as much, or even 10% as much as these NFL GMs and front offices do. They've been scouting this for a long time. They've been scouting these guys much longer than we have. They've been looking at tape much longer than we have. And Brian Gutekunst's a big thing why Packer draft night has become really exciting, because he can really do anything. He has shown a willingness to do anything, where in 2018, his first draft, he traded down. He got an extra first-round pick as a result. Then he traded back up to get Jair Alexander. Then he traded up in 2019 to get Darnell Savage. And then 2020, traded up for Jordan Love. Not expected, but he made a move up. 2021, he stayed put. 2022, he had a couple first-round picks, courtesy of the Devontae Adams trade. 2023, he was able to do a pick swap with the New York Jets and the Aaron Rodgers deal. So there's a little bit of everything he could do. And the big thing is, Gil, as Packer fans, we feel like we have a pretty good feeling Jordan Love is our guy. And I think Brian Gutekunst knows, hey, Jordan Love's our guy. We don't have to worry about quarterback. A lot of quarterbacks in this draft class who could go early. And you got to hope that there are a lot of quarterbacks who go right away, because that means great players are going to fall down the board immediately.
Yeah, and that's when maybe you don't have to go to 8 to get that great player. You can go to 14 or 15 to get that player. But to me, trading up is about scarcity at a position. It's really making sure you get one of these 2 or 3 guys, because after that, there's nobody worth taking until day 3.
Yeah, and the big thing is, too, you got to think, obviously, the Packers are looking to really load up on depth on the offensive line, especially in the interior, where maybe they have a first-round grade on a few guys. I think there's going to be a lot of offensive linemen who go in round 1 next week in the opening round of the NFL draft. And you got to think, as soon as those guys start flying off the board, maybe that's when Brian Gutekunst would make a move up for a guy that he absolutely wants to get, whether it's a Graham Barton from Duke, whether it's an Amarius Mims from Georgia, whether it's a Joe Alt from Notre Dame if he somehow falls. I could go on and on. There's a lot of guys who are available there, but maybe there's only a few guys that Brian Gutekunst really, really has his eye on and really likes. And just to give you some perspective, too, and I'm basing this off of the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart, where it's a pretty good tool. It's not, obviously, it's not 100% accurate or anything like that, but it's a pretty good indicator of the kind of value you can get for picks. And if, let's say, the Packers want to jump ahead of the Chicago Bears, their second first-round pick of the draft coming up, they're picking 9th overall. To jump ahead of the Bears to number 8, they would essentially have to trade their first-round pick, probably their early second-round pick, an early third-round pick, and possibly a 4th or 5th-round pick to make that deal happen. If they want to jump ahead of the Minnesota Vikings to number 10, they would have to trade their first-round pick, probably their second-round pick, and their 4th-round pick, maybe not include a 3rd-round pick. So if guys start to fall a little bit and they're within striking distance, they may not have to give up the whole farm to go get someone. And just one by one, pick by pick, those values start to decrease a little more, and that's when the Packers can look to strike. It's just a matter of who's on the board and who's available.
Right. And then you're always sort of weighing, and this is interesting because Brian Gutekunst, as we know, has really done very well in the mid to late rounds of a lot of these drafts. Are you better off, if you're Brian Gutekunst, to trade up and get that one guy you really like, or are you better off having a lot of darts in your ammo board there and say, okay, I have 11 picks. I'm going to use all 11 of them and see where the chips fall, because I can find some diamonds in the rough in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round that may, I can find a Dontavian Wicks who might be better than some guy who they're going to pick in the 1st or 2nd round when all is said and done. That's sort of the calculus you have to weigh and measure before you make that kind of deal. So, again, there's got to be a guy you really, really want if you're going to give up those opportunities, because that's what picks are. They're opportunities.
Gil, if the Packers do trade up, what position do you think they're trading up for?
To me, if they trade up, it's either going to be an offensive lineman or a member of the defensive secondary. Those are the 2 positions I think we're talking about. And for offensive linemen, probably a tackle. They may end up swinging them inside, depending. They like to do that. We know that. And then, for a defensive back, there's not a lot of safeties out there in this draft. Is Cooper DeJean a safety or a cornerback? Depends who you ask. He might be able to play slot and perimeter corner and safety. But, so many people have been saying, oh, he's the perfect fit for the Packers. If he's still out there, do you make that move at some point and try to grab him? But those are the 2 positions I think they'd be most likely. I mean, linebacker, I think, is possible, but I don't think there's too many guys with a first-round grade there that they'd be willing to do it for. How about you? What do you think?
I do think it's going to be either O-line or DB. That would be the top ones. What would be intriguing and exciting is, let's say a guy like Brock Bowers from Georgia drops. A tight end from Georgia, had a really good career there. He's going to be the number 1 tight end off the board. But if all these quarterbacks are going early and Brock Bowers starts to slip a little bit and teams value O-line more, make a move up. He could be a perfect H-back, and you could have a 3-headed monster tight end. That would be exciting for me. It's a little nerdy. It's a little intriguing, but I don't see, especially if he's giving an H-back role, I don't see that happening, but it's just a matter of having a Swiss Army knife in your tight end room and just having that versatility among your weapons. And you could just get a lot better on the perimeter and just in the skill position group on offense. What would be the most intriguing as well, or the most surprising too, is if they trade up for a D tackle. If they trade up for a D tackle, that's a bad sign that Kenny Clark may not be there much longer, because that's if there's a D tackle who drops, we were talking about, I really like Byron Murphy from Texas. I think he's got a lot of Aaron Donald potential in his game with his size and his mobility and his hands and everything, with his strength and power and speed. If they make a move up for a guy like that, or another a D tackle specifically, it's not a good sign for Kenny Clark's future in Green Bay. And that would have me very curious. The antennas would go up immediately for that.
Yeah, and it would, to me, it would also indicate that, the negotiations the two sides are not even close to being on the same page.
Yeah. And you got to think these D tackle contracts, they're valuable players in the NFL, and they should be paid like that. And so I'm hoping Kenny Clark is here beyond 2024, but draft night's going to be interesting to see where the Packers go in round one. Could tell a lot about not just the 2024 Packers, but the 2025, 2026, 2027 Packers as well. Now, if they trade down, Gil, which I think this is more likely than them trading up, because I think they want to. I think Brian Gutekunst loves to load up on draft picks. I could see that happening, where guys just essentially the only way I see them trading down is if their pick comes up at number 25 and there are a lot of guys still there who they really like, and they're just like, hey, we're going to move down and we're going to pick some of these guys and stash on picks.
Yeah, and to me, it would be fantastic. Like, you would have a big success in my mind if you can trade down, trade back, but add another first round pick for next year. That's that's how they got Darnell Savage. That's the kind of thing where you just want to be able to add that pick. And if the Packers aren't picking 25th this year, if they're not going to pick until the second round, so be it. But if you can get 2 first-round picks for next year, that would be quite intriguing.
And you got to think there could be some uber aggressive teams who want to get an additional first-round pick, whether it's a team on the cusp of winning a Super Bowl like the San Francisco 49ers. I don't know if the Packers would trade with the 49ers, but it could be possible. Detroit Lions, too. They were so close to getting the Super Bowl. Again, I don't think they'd trade with a division rival, but they've done it before. They've done it before on draft night. They're not afraid to do that. Just a lot of teams who feel like they are just so close and they want to gain an extra first-round pick. That could be possible. A team that I could see them trading down with, and usually with the draft, you got to look always who is the next team to pick after you. And right now, the next team to pick after the Packers are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Tampa Bay, this is a team that won probably the worst division in football a year ago. NFC South and AFC South were both pretty bad, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the NFC South at an 8-9 record last season. Nothing too flashy. Carolina Panthers, they have a lot of work to do. They don't have a first-round pick. They have 2 second-round picks, both they're number 33 and number 39, I believe. That's a team I could see. If you're the Packers, have them give up at least one of those second-round picks, possibly both of them, to trade up into the first round and get that first-round pick. And you have 4 second-round picks, and you have a lot more ammo in day 2 and day 3 going forward.
The only caveat to that, and the only reason that I'm not that enthusiastic about it, you already have 11 picks. You don't have room on this roster for 11 picks because you already have some pretty good talent and depth on this roster. So adding more picks to that equation may not gain you more players. It gives you more shots, more bites at the apple, so to speak. But there's only so many of these guys you're going to be able to put on your roster. So many of these guys you're going to be able to stash on your practice squad. At what point does that become counterproductive? And then the other question is, just because you add picks doesn't mean you can't then package some of those picks in a trade and move back up. So you just don't know. The answer to Brian Gutekunst is usually yes. He could do anything. He's traded up and traded back in the same round, let alone in the same draft. So, the one good thing about that is if you're a Packer fan and you're watching the draft, you better be on your toes because you never know when this team is going to pick.
And Gil, with some of those extra picks too, if they do gain extra picks, you got to think maybe they call other teams for a veteran player to help out at a position of need. Do you have any players that you have in mind who the Packers, if you're Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst, who you possibly kick the tires on and give a call to a team for a certain player?
Oh boy, there are a few. I mean, I mentioned Cooper DeJean. I think he would be just a great fit as a safety or a corner. I think that he would really add something. Boy, there are a few guys, but to me, it's got to be somebody special. It's got to be a guy who is really going to be. I mean, if you can get Alt, good Lord. I mean, I would love to see that addition. You put Alt on one side, and then whoever you got on the other side, whether you keep Zach Tom there, whether you have Rasheed Walker, whether you draft somebody else in the 4th round to try to fill that spot. There's a lot of variables. Whether you put, whether you end up having Andre Dillard start in that spot by the time the season rolls around. But there's a lot of intriguing possibilities. But if you're trading up, you got to get somebody special. How about you? Who would you target?
Well, I'm more so asking also. Cooper DeJean's the guy I want. He's the guy I want. We talked about it in previous episodes, but for current NFL players, is there anyone current NFL players would you trade a draft pick for if they became available?
Yeah, that's such a big menu because there are so many guys who, might fit that description, and unless you know who's available, it gets a little difficult. So, I mean, there are always players you sort of want to have, but I would need to know sort of who's on the block, kind of a thing, before I would really commit to somebody. How about you? Where are you going?
I got 2 guys, and
Okay.
A team that's looking to trade and has been very open about it, and a familiar face in Packerland who's running that team right now, Elliott Wolf, the New England Patriots. They are open for business. They're in full rebuild mode. Elliott Wolf he knows Brian Gutekunst. Brian Gutekunst beat out Elliott Wolf for the Packer general manager job. It was surprising Elliott Wolf didn't get that job. You would have thought nepotism would have prevailed, but not in Green Bay because they're a competent organization and that's how they do business. And I'm wishing the best for Elliott Wolf. I really hope he does well. But they have a lot of depth at inside linebacker, surprisingly. They have guys like Raekwon McMillan. They signed Browns linebacker Sione Takitaki. Jelani Tavai has played some meaningful snaps in the NFL. And then Jawan Bentley, who has been probably their best inside linebacker. He's 6'2", 250. He's 27 years old. Their new head coach is Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo was a really good inside linebacker during his time in the NFL. And you got to think Gerard Mayo may have conversations with Elliott Wolf saying, hey, I know how to coach this position. I know how to find these guys. We could save a lot of money and we can get some draft picks if we trade one of these linebackers. I would give the New England Patriots a call for one of those inside linebackers just because that's an area of need for the Packers. And if they don't land a Peyton Wilson or Edgerrin Cooper, whoever it may be, whoever they're thinking of targeting in the draft, Jawan Bentley would be a pretty nice addition on this defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could totally see that. You have to fit him in under the cap, but always room for one more if you manipulate it the right way.
And Brian Gutekunst isn't afraid to trade with his buddies and former colleagues. He trades with John Schneider from the Seahawks all the time. It happens all the time. And who knows, maybe Elliott Wolf has some hard feelings between him and Gutekunst because of job statuses and everything. And Gutekunst getting the job over Elliott Wolf, what may be. It's just it'd be very full circle if that trade happened between Brian Gutekunst's former boss's son and Brian Gutekunst. But then another guy worth keeping an eye on, Cardinals safety Budda Baker. He requested a trade out of Arizona last April, entering the final year of his contract. And Gil, he's also represented by the same agent as Jordan Love, David Mulugeta of Athletes First. He represents Budda Baker as well. Baker turns 29 next January, so he'd be an old man on the Packers, but he's going into the final year of his contract. Arizona is in a full rebuild. It's an uphill climb for that franchise right now. They were competitive last year, but still, there's a reason they had the number 4 overall. They have the number 4 overall pick in this year's draft. They're just not very good right now. The only potential issue I see with this, obviously, is that they spent so much money on Xavier McKinney at the safety spot this past offseason. The Packers did. And who knows, Budda Baker's probably going to want a big contract extension to a team he gets traded to. I don't know if the Packers are willing to invest that much money in the safety position significantly and specifically. But if you can get if you could trade no more than a 4th round pick for a guy like Budda Baker, and if you're going all in for next year, why not?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is just the cap hit. That would be the big concern because then, do you want to extend a 29-year-old guy, and are you going to start with the void years again and all of that stuff to try to lower the 2024 cap hit? I love the player. I'm not sure I love the situation. That's basically where I'm at with Budda Baker. It's
going to be interesting to see. I wouldn't be surprised. Again, the expectation is they won't trade for a veteran player on draft day. It's not how they usually do it. It doesn't really happen in the NFL in general that often. And when it does, it's usually a disgruntled player getting moved. But who knows? Brian Gutekunst has surprised us before. Maybe he'll surprise us again.
Stranger things have happened, as they say.
Well, Gil, assuming that the Packers stand pat, they keep all 11 draft picks. How do you see those picks breaking down by position? How many offensive linemen? How many running backs? DBs? How many do you see being allocated amongst all those picks?
I think they'll go for one quarterback late in the draft. I think they'll add at least one running back, probably one, but possibly two. Maybe one H-back late in the draft, but I think unrestricted free agents might be the way to go there. I'm looking at a minimum of 3 offensive linemen, maybe even 4, depending on the breakdown between tackle and interior. At least one linebacker, at least one safety, probably a corner, and maybe an edge rusher. So that's sort of my minimum requirements there. It's going to be, very interesting. And, there are certain positions like edge rusher. They'll pick one every draft, probably. Offensive line, multiple players almost every draft.
And you should.
And you should, right. That's what you should. And now we know quarterback. They may do, 2 out of every 3 years. They'll take a flyer on a developmental quarterback. So, I sort of see those as sort of my minimums. How about you?
I see them drafting 3 offensive linemen. I see them drafting 2 running backs. I see them drafting like a tight end H-back. I do see them drafting a quarterback. I mean, Brian Gutekunst kind of said it he said in interviews where, hey, we're going to look to keep stocking that room, which is really smart. You're going back to the Ron Wolf tree and thinking with that. 2 linebackers. I think they're going to take one early and they're going to take one later, take a flyer on a guy. And then 2 DBs, whether it's 2 safeties, whether it's 2 corners and a corner who can convert into a safety, whatever it may be. I think that's the way it shakes out if they do stand pat, but they're most likely not going to stand pat because that's just the way it works. I can't remember the last time a team actually kept every single pick before and after a draft and during a draft. Every team seems to make at least one trade during draft.
There's always a guy you want to get. And as the board is falling, it could be in the 6th round. There's a guy, hey, we want this guy. We got to get in front of this team. We know they want a linebacker. We want a linebacker. We're going to grab this guy. So, yeah, there's almost always a move, and that keeps it interesting.
Carl Brooks was the 6th round pick last year. He looks like a pretty darn good NFL player. And notice, Gil, I didn't say the Packers are going to draft a D tackle. I don't think they will. I think Kenny's going to get an extension. I really do.
I hope so.
I think that guy's going to be around for a little bit longer, and I'm all for it. But Gil, before we wrap up with some trivia, what articles do you have coming up online for the Packers Post and Cheesehead TV? Obviously, you're very busy with Islanders postseason right now in the NHL, but the draft is right around the corner, and we've had a little dead period, but now we're gearing up again.
Yeah, no, very involved in the draft. On the Packers Post, I had an article on the 5 positions I think they're most likely to go with early in the draft. So I previewed 5 players at each one of those positions who fit the Packers profile and would be a good fit for the team. And on Cheesehead TV, I sort of did a little comparison historically between the 1995 and 96 drafts, the 2009, 2010 drafts, and then last year's draft. And as we head to this year's, the year before the Packers won the Super Bowl, both of the last 2 times they did it, they had an amazing draft. I look at 2023, that was a pretty amazing draft. If you can add the right couple of players now, you're setting yourself up maybe to have history repeat itself. So that's what I looked at for Cheesehead late this week.
Their first 5 picks are obviously going to be quarterback, receiver, kicker, punter, long snapper, right?
Why not 5 long snappers? Let's get real competition at that position.
It's the year of the long snapper. We all know that. That's what 2024 is. It's in the horoscopes and everything. Don't look it up, but I'm just saying it's the year of the long snapper.
Please don't look it
up. Well, Gil, you ready for some trivia?
Let's go for it.
Well, we had discussed the Packers signing veteran offensive tackle Andre Dillard on Thursday. He was a former first-round pick who played his college ball at Washington State. He was a 3-year starting offensive lineman for the Cougars. And during his final season, who was he primarily protecting at quarterback at Wazoo? And he's a current NFL quarterback right now.
Wow.
I'll give you a hint. If you know Napoleon Dynamite, Uncle Rico. Think Uncle Rico.
Oh, wow. Uncle Rico. NFC or AFC team?
He's in the AFC.
He's in the AFC.
And he's with a new team this year. He was in the AFC this past season. He has a mustache.
Yeah, no, I got that from the clue. Oh, boy. I'm drawing a blank. Who is it?
It was current Vegas Raiders quarterback Gardner Minshew II.
There you go.
Played his final collegiate season for the Cougars after transferring from East Carolina. He balled out in college with Dillard as his top protector. In his final season in college, throwing 38 touchdowns and only 9 interceptions in 2018. Minshew signed with the Raiders this offseason. He nearly led the Indianapolis Colts to an AFC South division title in 2023. So it's kind of away from the Packers stuff, but hey, trivia is kind of bare this time of year, Gil. It's I'm ready for draft weekend to come up, and then we can cook up some more trivia.
Absolutely. I thought you were going to give me some other, Packers draft trivia stuff, but okay.
I was hoping to, and we're gonna wait till next week. I'm just gonna, okay. Yeah. Well, it's the cupboard's kind of bare right now, so so we're working on it.
Okay, that sounds very fair. Well, Sean, thank you so much. Always great to do this. That's it for today. We'll be right back here next week. We'll be right after the first round of the draft. Follow us on Twitter at Gil Packers and at GB Packer Sean to stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackersean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And a big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. Thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.